Hi guys, welcome into the 2024 Jewel School Workshop. My name is Susan Thomas, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make a ring. I know you all have had a lot of fun this year during our workshops, learning from lots of different artists. I like to do rings, I like to do bangles, I like to do hoops. Those are kind of the types of jewelry I make, and so I thought this year I would focus on those things. So this particular ring is featuring a single coin-shaped bead. This is a mother of pearl coin-shaped bead. It does work with other coins, but we're gonna focus in on that mother of pearl because it's so beautiful and so fun. Pearl's mama right there, so lustrous. Also features a bypass style ring in a 14 gauge brass wire. So it's pretty simple to make, but there are some ins and outs to making a bypass ring and to getting that coin placed just right. So we're gonna talk about that today. We're gonna talk about wire, we're gonna talk about beads, we're gonna talk about making jewelry, and we're gonna have lots of fun. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Now, first thing I always like to do before I start in a class is just tell you what you need to get started. Because the worst thing you can do is get started making something and not have everything you need to do the actual project. So there's some tools that I use that I really like to make these particular rings. Do you have to use the same tools? Absolutely not. You can use others, but when I teach classes, I always recommend to whoever I'm teaching to use what I use because it's easier than trying to go figure it out by yourself. I mean, you don't want to recreate the wheel every time you learn a new piece of jewelry, right? Then later, if you find something else works better for you, you can go that way. So I'm going to start out right here. This particular tool is probably the most specialized tool of all the ones I'm going to use today. It is called a wrap and tap plier, and it is a bail shaping plier, but it's kind of a special bail shaping plier. This particular bail shaping plier has 3 different barrels on it. That's a 13 millimeter, a 15, and a 20 millimeter, and they're great for making rings. They're great for sizing and shaping your rings, both the actual shank of the ring and also the large loops. But what this features that's really special to me is the bottom jaw of this plier. It has actually got this kind of silicone sleeve that fits over the bottom jaw of the plier, and also the bottom jaw is flattened on the inside, whereas the top jaw is round all the way around. So this is a super gripper. It actually holds onto your wire, even your 14 gauge wire, and grips it and keeps it in place while you're working with it. So it allows you to manipulate the wire in a much more aggressive fashion. And since we're using 14 gauge wire, you need to be a little aggressive with it. I always say you've got to be the boss of your wire, or else the wire will be the boss of you, because wire is amazing. It has a memory. It also seems to have a personality sometimes. And some people struggle to use it or to work with it. So having a tool like this, essential. Now I'm going to show you lots of different tools, lots of supplies today. If you guys want to pick up anything that you see me work with, you can always go on jewelschool.com and grab any of the supplies that I'm using here today. Now I'm going to put that to the side because that's, like I said, the most specialized tool. The other things I'm going to be using, I'm going to be using a bracelet, and this is not a bracelet. This is definitely not a bracelet mandrel. It's a ring mandrel today. So this little guy right here actually has all the different sizes of the rings, and once I get my ring shaped, I'm going to use this mandrel to size my ring. So that is going to be important today. I'm going to be using a flush cutter. Your flush cutter is going to be very important today. You do not want to use a cutter that does not actually cut a flat flush cut, because we're not really doing any filing today, although you can if you want to, but we're not really going to be doing any filing or anything like that, or hammering to disguise any wire marks or to file off any rough edges. So your flush cutter that cuts a nice super flat flush cut is going to be essential to working with your wire today. And if you don't know what a flush cutter is, this is a really nice one. I love this one. It's actually a plier. It's plier number 61 here at JTB. But on one side, you can see how it kind of divots in like that? That's going to give you a pointy cut on your wire. The other side is flat, and that's going to give you a flat flush cut. When you feel it, it's going to feel flat top to bottom. And that's the best type of cut on a piece of wire jewelry that's not going to actually poke or scratch you or your customer or your mom or your sister, whoever wears it. So very important on the flush cutter. And then I'm also going to be using some basic tools. This is my round nose and my chain nose pliers. Round nose plier, if you've never used one, is round all the way around. On the end right there, it's pointy but round. jawed. And chain nose is also pointy and looks just like the round nose plier, but if you look on the inside, you can see it's flat on the inside of the jaw. So this is for squishing, opening, and closing, and this is for making loops and coils. Now, these three tools right here, all three together, I actually call these the trifecta. You could pretty much do any type of wire work, jewelry, if you have those three tools. So if you're just getting started and you want to pick 3 tools to start with, I would pick these 3. Okay, so I'm just gonna put those to the side, right there. And then as far as materials are concerned, like I said, 14 gauge wire. This is what makes the ring, okay? It's a 14 gauge wire, it's very sturdy. It's approximately, it's just under 2 millimeters in the size. I believe it's like 1.8 something or another, but it's just under 2 millimeters. It's a nice thick wire. It's gonna make a nice band that's gonna hold its shape without you having to do any hammering or anything crazy to make it hold its shape. So that's what the pretty little loop is there on the end, and that's what's holding everything together. And then to get the piece of mother of pearl on there, we're gonna use a 24 gauge craft wire. Now, this is brass. You can also use a 24 gauge brass wire if you want to, or a jeweler's gold or a jeweler's brass. But I'm just gonna use this artistic wire because it matches the color really nicely and it's a tarnish resistant wire. Now, finally, of course, mother of pearl. So I like using mother of pearl with these. First of all, they're inexpensive. It's super affordable. You can get lots and lots of them for a very low price. And second of all, they're beautiful. Honestly, they've just got a really pretty luster. Of course, some people call them pearl's mama because the mother of pearl comes from the shell of the mollusk that creates the pearl. So that's why it's called mother of pearl. But they're really fun too, because not all of them are exactly the same. Like some of them will look a little crazy. Some of them will have like little different colors of marks on them. Some of them will be all white. They all have different types of luster, but they're all really smooth and nice on the sides. And also they also have really nice holes. See, like if I show you the other side of this particular mother of pearl, you can see this side. I personally like this side better. Has almost like this little, just an indentation with a little bit of a different caramely color on it. But then the first side that I showed you here is almost all the same color. So, but they're both equally lustrous and beautiful. So let me put that to the side and we'll get started making our ring here. So I'm starting with my 14 gauge wire. And I'm gonna pull about 10 inches of wire. I have notes over here. I'm gonna refer to my notes to make sure I don't mess up the ring. I know I invented the ring. However, I do need notes. It's so funny when you first make something, you're like, oh, I'm gonna remember that, no problem. And then you finish and you're like, I don't remember how many inches of wire I used. And so usually the second time I make something is the worst one ever. The first one is usually, I get it and I love it, right? The second one, never get it right. And the third one is when you perfect all the things that you did wrong the first time. So it's the third time's always the charm. So you're gonna use 14 gauge wire. You're gonna pull about 10 inches of that wire. Now you're gonna be able to adjust the size of this ring because it's a bypass ring. So don't worry too much about having more or less wire, but I always say more is more. So if you wanna pull 12 inches of wire, go for it. So I'm just measuring this, and I think I do have a couple extra inches, not quite 12 right there, but the end was kind of squiggly. This was the end of my spool on this. So that's perfect. Then go ahead and pull 12 inches of your 24 gauge and have your coin bead ready. And then we'll flip the page to the next page here on my little notes, if I can make it come up there. So we've gathered the supplies, we've got our tools, and so we are ready to go. We're gonna grab our flush cutter and we are going to flush cut the end of this wire. So just grabbing it right there and I'm flush cutting it. It was pointing, you can see now it's nice and flat and flush. Ta-da! Well, that was easy, right? You thought this was gonna be hard, didn't you? You did this, you're like, oh my gosh, this ring's gonna be so hard. It's not, and I put these down as intermediate classes because I wanted you guys to know how to handle tools. But really, if you're a beginner and you're watching right now, you're gonna be fine. We're gonna get through this, I promise. All right, so what you're gonna do now is you are going to grab the end of this with your wrap and tap plier, and you are going to make a loop. Now you're gonna use the smallest loop on here. This is a 13 millimeter loop. But basically what we're trying to do is make a loop that's gonna fit approximately the same size as your coin bead. So if you have a smaller coin bead, a smaller mother of pearl, or a larger one, then you could adjust this. So I'm just gonna wrap this around here into a full loop like so. It's gonna come right up against that piece. Super easy so far, no problem. I'm gonna take my glasses and put those on now because things start getting a little squirrely once you get into this project, and I wanna be able to see what's going on. I don't want you guys to mess up any more than I want to mess up. Okay, so flush cut one end, then we're using that wrap and tap plier or a bail shaping plier to make a full loop that matches the size of your coin shaped bead. So let's get our coin shaped bead out here and let's see if it matches the size. Yes, so see that guy right there? What you want to make sure of is you do not want the coin bead to actually slip through the loop. Does that make sense? So it needs to basically be almost exactly the same size. I want it to almost to sit on top of that loop as opposed to sitting inside of it. Now, a lot of times when I make these, I think, oh, I'm gonna make it sit inside. And then you do, and it looks really cool, but the main problem that you have at that point is that the bead kind of flips back and forth. So this is not only gonna create kind of a bezel for that bead, but it's also gonna create a seat for the bead. So you need to make sure it sits. See how I'm holding and nothing's holding it in. It's sitting right on top of that loop. If you mess up this particular part of it, you will have trouble with the ring later. The bead will flip back and forth and it'll drive you absolutely bonkers and you'll be like, Susan, you know, you'll go to, you can follow me on JTV Susan on my Facebook page or on Instagram, but you'll send me a message. You'll be like, Susan, I don't understand why my bead is flipping back and forth on my coined bypass ring. And I'll say, well, did your bead sit on top of the loop or did it fit inside the loop? And once we figured out that it fits inside the loop, you'll realize, oh, that's why it does that. So it flips around. I forget all the time. Every time I make a new one, I do that and I'm like, why? I know that in my head. This always happens, but I do it anyway. All right, so anyway, you might have to adjust that just a little bit, but adjust that, get it just exactly right. And like I said, make sure that fits on top of the wire. Now, next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna make the actual ring shank. So you're gonna take this exact same piece, you're gonna hold on to this and see how I've kind of got my loop that I just made inside the jaw. So I'm holding on to it so it stays pretty. And I'm gonna go to that next size up on the wrap and tap plier. And I'm going to wrap the wire around the wrap and tap like so. So that was my little loop that I made right there for my coin pearl. And this is going to be the ring shank. You can go a little farther if you want to, just like so. But see how this is a great plier, isn't it? I mean, it's the super gripper. I think they should rename it. I call it the super gripper. So, but I love my wrap and tap plier. It's super, super, super awesome. It really does make a big difference for me. Now, next thing is we've got to size the ring. So you've got this whole kind of base made. It looks kind of crazy. You don't really know what's going on. You've got your, your wire kind of sticking out there on the side. And this is when you realize I totally didn't need 10 inches of wire, but I wanted to make sure I didn't run out, so we used 10. So now what you're gonna do is you're gonna get out that trusty ring mandrel. So this is when you size your ring. So right now, doing that kind of medium loop on there, I have a size 6. So I actually do not wear a size 6 ring on any finger except maybe my pinky. So I'm going to increase the size of this by pressing up the ring mandrel. And now if you just press up to the size 7, folks, it's probably not gonna be a size 7 because wire it'll shrink back down. So you're gonna want, if you go up to a size 7.5 and bring it down, that'll be about a size 7. But you wanna just, when you push this up the piece, like so, you want it to just sit at the size you want. Let me find my little size. I was just trying to find the sizes there. So you just want it to sit there. So I want you to see the numbers. So let me kind of go towards the camera so you guys can see the numbers. The problem with ring mandrels to me is that you can just barely see those numbers. But see how it's right on the 7? So when I just push it up there, I'm not pushing it all on there and it's sitting at the 7. That's when I know I have a size 7. If I want to make a size 8, I'm going to push it up a little bit farther. I'm just going just past that 8 to kind of stretch out that wire, and then I'll pull it back down. And if it just pushes up to the 8, without me having to shove on it, then I did it right. All right, so I'm gonna give it just a little bit more of a, like that, and let's see, yeah, perfect, all right. And so you may have to actually then take a little bit more of the wire and wrap it just a little bit around that mandrel to finish that off. Ta-da, very nice, okay. So that is essentially the ring formed to fit my size 8 finger, right there, which is that one. Ta-da. Okay, all right, so this is going to be the base of your ring. Everything's set and good. Okay, so now we're just gonna trim off the extra wire, and I recommend leaving about about an inch of wire, maybe a little bit less of wire right there, just in case of error. Now I still have about 6 inches of wire. Let me see. Yeah, I probably have enough to make another one. So I over guessed on my wire. All right, so now the final finishing touch of this, you can do a lot of different things. You could make this a double bypass ring if you want to. You could put another mother of pearl on the other side if you wanted to. I am going to make that little loop that you see on the end of this with a round nose plier. That's just kind of how I like to finish them. But I like it that way, but everybody's different. So you feel free to change this up and do however you want to make this your own. Speaking of making rings your own, I have a story. I always have stories. And you guys probably, some of you who know me, you've heard all these stories like 100 times, but it's just, you know, I have stories about making jewelry because I've been making it for a long time. But when I used to own a store, and I used to teach people how to make jewelry, which is pretty funny because when I first opened the store, I really only knew how to make one thing, and that was a basic wire-wrapped necklace. I could make a wire-wrapped connector, and I could connect them together, and that was pretty much how I thought jewelry was made because that's what I knew how to do. And after I'd been there for about a week, I was teaching people how to do everything because I realized that there was like 80,000 different ways to make jewelry, and I am a fast learner. So, but anyway, I still thought I knew everything, so I thought there was basically one way to make rings, and that was it. So I learned how to make a ring, and I started teaching a class called Rings, 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 of course. And I taught different people over the years, many of them very memorable. Some of them got great at it, some of them became famous, some of them never learned it. It just, you know, different people. But there was this one particular girl who came into one of my classes, and she came into the ring class, and she sat down and she made this ring, and honestly, it was, to me, the craziest thing I'd ever seen. It was just like, I mean, wire everywhere, and just, I mean, I don't know. I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy. But anyway, she made that ring, and she made a bunch more, and they just kind of all turned out like that. And I'm like, well, that doesn't look like my ring. And so in my head, you know, my rings are the way they're supposed to be made, and this is not. So, and this just kind of goes to show you something. But she starts taking these crazy rings, as I called them, around to boutiques in town, and she starts selling them. And people love them. I mean, love them. More than any ring I ever made, okay? I mean, they love them. She starts selling them, and she becomes like the ring person in town, and she's just making these crazy rings, and they're just, I guess because they're organic and they're fun, and they featured really cool stones. I mean, people just loved them. And so and she came back, and she'd get more stuff, and she'd make more rings, and she'd go out and she'd sell more. And I mean, I learned a big lesson, and the lesson is this: there's not one way to do anything, okay? There really isn't. Just because you learned how to do it one way, and that's the way it's supposed to be done, doesn't mean it can't be done a different way. And if you do something different, and maybe it does look crazy to me or to somebody else, it may end up being the next big thing. So anytime you learn something, sure, go ahead and learn it, learn what somebody teaches you, but take it to your own place, because you could be the next ring lady, okay? So that was a big lesson for me. I mean, it's so funny. I also, when I was really young, I used to think that there was only one way to cut onions because that's how my mom taught me. So I've learned a lot over the years. Okay, so anyway, back to the ring, and here's hoping you guys become the next ring lady. This guy right here is cut. All we need to do now is make that little loop on the other side to kind of give it its little embellishment. So I'm going to use a round nose plier to do this, and I'm going to trim up just a little bit more just because I know things, and I'm pretty sure that this is a little bit too long. So I'm going to trim it up just a little bit more right here, and then I'm going to take my round nose plier, and I'm going to wrap this into a loop. So you got it, oops, sorry about that. You got to grab it. You got to make sure you're right at the very end, and then you've got to loop this into your loop. Now you can see it's a little bit more of a bypass than I want. I want my little loop to fit, to be kind of right perpendicular with that end right there. So the way to fix that is just to kind of give this another little trim with your round nose plier, like so. Make sure, not your round nose plier, with your flush cutter. And see, now it's open again. And I'm going to continue rolling that piece. Just pop it back in there and roll like so. I'm getting closer. I'm still a little bit off, so I'm going to actually trim this just a little bit more. And you can do this a few times. I always recommend doing it just a little bit at a time and don't overdo it. So that looks good now. That's kind of where I want it. Okay, so now when I put this on, my pieces are going to be kind of in line with each other. All right, so we're going to keep on rolling. I'm actually going to trim this side up just a little tiny bit because I want it to have just a little bit more of a taper to the edge of the wire, and I want to have a little nicer loop. So I'm going to trim that side as well. And then we'll just pop that back down and roll it in with, whoops, slippery little guy. And roll that in. So I don't know if you can see what I did right there, right along this little spot. I actually flush cut my wire. Let me get him just down in there like so, so that it was basically going to sit up flat and flush against the edge there. And you can also file this just a little bit if you don't like that little lip right there. I often will get out a file, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can use a jeweler's file if you want to, or you can literally go to the nail store and get metal nail files. They won't last as long, but you can, and you can just kind of file those ends. This is a soft wire, so it'll work well enough. I know a lot of people, a lot of jewelry makers who use nail supplies to finish their jewelry. So I always say use what you have. Don't feel like you have to go out and purchase that perfect professional tool that you saw, you know, used on, I don't know, jewel school or wherever, or you know, in some, maybe you went to a professional jewelry maker shop and you saw some really amazing tool that grinds and cuts and does all this stuff, and it's really expensive and you don't have the money to get that. Use what you have until you can get what you want. And you will find that you are very successful. The less stress you put on yourself, the better off you'll be. All right, now next step. We are going to start wrapping the 24 gauge wire onto the ring band. So you've got it sized, everything looks good, you're happy with your form, it fits your finger, so far so good. If you want to at this point, you can actually take this and you can hammer these pieces. It looks really good to kind of put this onto a bench block and give it a little hammer. I'll see if I've got one and show you guys that. Yeah, I do. And this is not necessary. This is a if you want to type step. So what you would do to do that is you just place it right here on your bench block, and you're going to give the different segments a little hammer. So like this little guy right here, just gonna hammer him a little bit. And you see I'm upside down, and that's okay. And then you're gonna get this little guy right here, and you're gonna hammer him a little bit. It's a little difficult to get to that one. Let me see if I can kind of get him on the edge there. There we go. And that just gives it a little bit of character from the top. See how it kind of just bezels that out just a little bit, and this just a little bit. You can do more or less, and then because it's brass wire, if you want to, you can put this on your rotary tool, polish it up, and kind of make that shiny again if you want to, or you can leave that. You can also take the ball peen side of the hammer if you want to and place it back on your ring mandrel. This is just another alternative to what I've done, and you can put some little, and I'm not going to do it now because I want mine to be flat and straight and everything, but you can actually put some little texture on that, and you can also do that on the ring band. Now, if you do texturize your ring band, it will change the size of your ring. So metal on metal expands the shape and hardens it. So if you use metal on metal, things will get bigger. So if it's too small, great, use your metal on metal. But if it's just the right size, don't do that because you will not have the size that you want anymore. All right, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take about 12 inches of a 24 gauge wire. Now this is a finer wire. I've lost my pearl, there it is. Okay, this is a finer wire than what you were using before. 24 gauge is about a 0.5 millimeter, and it fits through most beads, so I like it as a wrapping wire. It's got a little bit of body to it. It's a little bit stronger than some of these smaller wires like a 26 or a 28, but it's gonna be perfect for wrapping this pearl onto my ring base. Now, the easiest way to do this is to actually open up the loop that you're going to place your mother of pearl piece on. If you open that up, it's gonna be a lot easier to wrap inside here. If you keep it closed, you're gonna have to do a lot of finagling to get that wire in there. So always give yourself a tail. This is one of the tips that I tell people all the time, is if you don't have a tail to use as a handle, you're gonna have a really hard time wrapping wire onto another wire. A lot of people try really hard to start with the very end of the wire and start wrapping it on there, and that is 100% impossible, folks. You're gonna waste a little bit of the wire. So just give yourself a little grace and give yourself a tail and use that as a handle. So I'm holding on to that. See how I'm using it as a handle? You can clip it off later. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna start wrapping the wire, and I'm gonna give it a couple of wraps that I know I'm gonna cut off, and then you're gonna start wrapping them together. So what I'm doing here is adding the wires in and then pressing them together to make basically what I'm doing is I'm making a place for my bead, and I'm making something that's going to hold the bead in place, but I'm also making a really pretty little decoration on my ring that's going to become part of the bezel. Now I've done 4 wraps so far. I'm going to wrap a couple more, and I'm just going to bring those in, and just as you go, you can either use your fingernails or you can use a chain nose plier to kind of squeeze those wires back together so that they look cleaner. You're going to have gaps. Gaps happen, but when you're doing this, when you finish it, you don't want those gaps. So if you take care of the gaps as you go, they'll look better at the end. If you wait until the end, you're gonna struggle. The gaps aren't ever gonna go away. So make sure that you do this as you go. Now, I've said that about gaps. You already heard my story. If you love the gaps, go for gaps. Maybe gaps are your thing, right? So maybe you're gonna be the next ring lady because of the gaps. I don't know. All right, now I like to do about 14 wraps here. It's a really nice accent. I found the more I make, the prettier it is, and also creates a really pretty seat for that pearl, or that mother of pearl. So I'm about 10, 11, 12, and see I'm having to kind of go around things. Make sure you take care of your gaps. Let me get my gaps right here. I'm gonna squeeze those in. If you use a brass wrapping wire, you're not gonna have to worry too much about any tool marks on your wire. I am using a plated wire, so I am having to be a little bit careful. You can actually take the plating off of your wire as you go. I do have a gap. I do not like it. I'm going to try to fix it. There we go. All right, and then a couple more wraps. 1, 2, 3. All right, so then let me get this little guy over here. Now here's my little tail. He's wrapped himself around everything. So we're going to get him out of the way. And this is where you want to use your chain nose plier to kind of grab that little piece right there. And all right, so we're gonna make sure everybody is pretty. I'm not gonna cut that tail off yet, because what I have found that when I do this type of ring, that little tail right now, you can see see how it wraps, see how it's moving, the tail's moving and my piece of wire is moving. If I cut it off right now, I might cut it off in the wrong spot, and then it doesn't really hide the way I want it to inside the ring. All right, so next step is to place your pearl. So you got that opening. I'm gonna leave it open right now. You can leave it open. No, actually, I'm gonna close it. I'm gonna close it up, that's right. So listen, do what I do, not what I say. Go ahead and close it up. So we're gonna close that up. You can use your fingers here if you don't wanna get tool marks on that piece. And so now you can see, make sure that all these little wraps that you made are inside the circle. Got it? All right, now you should have plenty of wire left. You should have about 6 or 8 inches of wire left. And then you're gonna grab your mother of pearl. Now here's where you get choices. You can choose to use that pretty top side, like that, with the pretty little color on it, or you can go like this side with a much more consistent finish. Everybody's different. Some people think that's a blemish, and so some people won't like that. Other people think it's a beauty mark, and they'll really love it. So I recommend making them both ways. I like the beauty mark. My fiance Tony was like, he likes this side better. He wants the perfect side. So everybody's different. So let's go ahead and put this on here like so, and place it. So when you get down to the piece, the actual bezel, we'll call it, you actually need to leave yourself just a little tiny bit of wire, because there's a lip on that pearl. So when you got that little lip, you want to accommodate that lip. And so what you're going to do is then press the pearl up against the end, and see there's a little bit longer piece of wire right there, so that it sits on top. And then just kind of pop him over on there, and he should just be just perfectly in place like that. Now, the other side is not as easy as the first side to wrap, because you actually have to kind of feed the wire through. Just is what it is. So what I like to do is see there's an opening right there. Remember there's the opening that you have on that side. I'm not gonna wrap towards that opening. I'm gonna wrap away from that opening. And the reason is because I don't want an open end up against an open end. And that's just kind of a crafter's secret. You never wanna have two open ends together. It's kind of like you don't wanna use two open jump rings right together because those two openings are always gonna come somehow together and your whole piece of jewelry is gonna fall apart. So if you're gonna put an open jump ring someplace, you're probably gonna want a closed jump ring next to it. If you're gonna wrap and leave an open piece of wire on a ring, you're gonna wanna wrap that other open piece away from it. It's very important. So that means that when you wrap this very first wrap, you have to make sure that that wrapping is going to go the opposite direction of that opening. So I'm just gonna wrap it around here and I'm gonna pull my pearl down, my mother of pearl, I keep calling him a pearl, down and tighten it up in the place that I want it. So this is the wrap that's the most important. It needs to be tight. And you see me kind of pulling on that and pulling and pulling and pulling and getting it tight because that's what's gonna hold everything in place. And then the wrap is going in this direction away from the opening. So if I had this piece and it was on that side of that first wrap, I'd be in the wrong spot. So, but I'm not in the wrong spot, I'm in the right spot. And you can see there's just a tiny, tiny gap between the piece of mother of pearl and your band. So you're gonna be able to do those wraps. It's not gonna be impossible. It's gonna be doable. So now this is the only time ever I recommend doing the poke and wrap method because you have no choice. So you're actually gonna poke the wire through the bezel part and you're going to pull. Now please be very careful as you're pulling because you want to make sure that you do not get a kink in this wire. Sometimes I'll put my finger inside of it and you can see I'll pull tight to my finger and then I'll pull it out, and if I'm getting kinks I might even use like a round nose plier and pop that in there and pull it tight around that and then continue wrapping. I usually don't get those kinks in this style, but if you do, that's a way to kind of compensate, and I'll show you that again. So I'm gonna go poke it through underneath. Can you see what I did there? I poke it through underneath and then pull and put my finger in the way so it stays unkinked. I'm gonna pull a little bit farther. I'm gonna put that round nose plier in there so it stays unkinked. I'm gonna pull tight to that, and then I'm gonna pull the end completely tight up against the wire. I'm gonna pause and let you guys see that. So see what's happening now. Once again, as you go, give it a squeeze, make it look pretty, and then continue. So we're gonna do about the same number of wraps on this side. I found I really like the look of the wraps, and I've also found that the more wraps I do, the tighter and the more secure the bezel is, and the better my stone sits in the piece of jewelry. So I'm just gonna kind of keep on wrapping, and yep, it is a little bit more finagling with wire, but it really is worth it. It does make a difference in the finished piece of jewelry. So that's 3. So you've got about 11 more to go. And I'm just gonna let you guys roll with that on this. Now, actually, I'm gonna put this down just for a second. Let me put this down just as after I get that one wrapped and ready. Always, okay, we're gonna take a break. Put everything down. Everybody put your ring down, put your tools down, put your wire down, maybe clean up your space a little bit, get everything where it's supposed to be. And I just want you guys to, take your glasses off. You don't have to see anything for just a minute. What I want you to do is just kind of center yourself, because I know that right now you're super, super tense. You've been working on this. You're trying to get it right. Maybe you've made a mistake and it's just, you're so annoyed and just like, can I rewind her? I need to start over. Take a second for yourself. I want you to take a deep breath. Let it out. It's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is your very first one, okay? I know you feel better now. Maybe take a sip of your drink, maybe go take a bathroom break, maybe pause me just for a few minutes and before you come back to the ring, because you're doing great. Your ring looks great. Even if it's crazy, I bet you're the next ring lady, okay? So just take a second for yourself, and I find that sometimes you get into a project and you find yourself sitting there for a really long time and then you get super stiff. And making jewelry, I mean, I know we're not working out or anything, but you do use your muscles, maybe your brain muscles, your eye muscles, your shoulder muscles, your arm muscles, your hands get really tired. Sometimes my hands will get kind of uncomfortably tired after a while. So just take a second, flex your hands, take a deep breath, go to the bathroom, get a drink, whatever you need to do, and then come back to the project. I promise you will feel better. Okay, so now we're gonna get back to the project. So now, and this also, I love this because now I'm coming back to my ring and I'm like, let me see what's going on here, because you don't see things when you're looking at them all the time. So now you're coming back to your project, you've kind of got a fresh look at it, and you're like, oh, I think I could fix that up a little bit right there. I could squeeze this little piece together a little bit better. Maybe it'll look a little nicer. My little wraps are trying to sneak past the opening there, so I'll turn this a little bit just to make sure everything's in the right spot. And then I am going to continue with my wraps on the other side. All right, so to be continued, right? There we go. All right, so now we're gonna continue with that, and I'm not gonna do my little trick with my finger because I'm not having any trouble with this this wire doing anything crazy so far. And I'll tell you why. It's because, like I said, I don't know if I've told you guys this during this class or not, but wire has a memory, and once it kind of remembers what you're doing, if you're doing the same thing over and over again with it, it's gonna be like, oh, I know how to do that, and it's gonna just go right back in that same place. So unless you got a kink in it at the beginning, you're probably not gonna have any trouble with your wire at this point. So I'm just threading it through, making the loop, pulling it tight, and making sure that that next little piece is up against the ones I'm working on. So keep going, and see, I've got like a little funny piece right there, so let me make sure I fix that before I go on. Did I get it? Let's see. Ooh, the camera's bigger, so I like it. All right, so make sure that you don't get any weird, funny wraps, like overlapping wraps. And I think I had a little overlapping wrap right there. One thing about me that maybe you guys don't know is that I'm actually partially blind in my right eye. So anytime anybody tells me that they can't make jewelry because they can't see, I'm like, no, I literally can't see out of 75% of my right eye. And the part that I can see through, it's really super blurry. So it's like I can see what's there, but it's not in focus. So sometimes when I'm going along, I do, like, whoa, I really can't see that. But I accommodate it with my left eye, and also I use different tools. I use magnifiers, or I have a tool on my desk called an OT light. It has a big old magnifier and a light on it. I use that. Like if I really get to a point where I'm like, I just cannot see what's happening here, I don't know what it is and why it's not looking right, but I can tell it's not right, then I'll just go to my OT light and I will pop it under there and I will check it out and see what's going on. So, but don't tell me you can't do it because you can't see. I mean, unless you can't see in both eyes, then if you got a little squirrely vision, use a magnifier, use glasses, use magnifier glasses, use lighting, use whatever you think you need to do this, but don't strain your eyes. I always am very careful at the end of the day. If I feel like, gosh, I've made a lot of jewelry and my eyes are starting to get tired, I just put it away and do it another time. But I do think, and maybe you have another problem. Maybe you have a different disability, than what I have. Maybe you have something else that makes it harder for you to make jewelry. But there are ways to kind of accommodate and to compensate for, and I don't like to call them, it's not really fair to call them disabilities, but your personal abilities. Maybe you can't do what everybody else can do, but maybe you can do something else better. So focus on that. And, it's just kind of, I don't know, I try to stay positive about it, and I think you guys, you didn't know what I mean. Everybody has their things that are harder for them or more difficult. So if you just stay positive and you do things different than other people, but you still get to the same end result, perfect. You did it. All right, so I've got about 10 wraps here. I'm gonna do just a few more to finish this off. And you know what, maybe your wraps aren't perfect like this. I have a weird obsession with making my wraps perfect, but maybe yours aren't, and maybe that's better, because that's your way of doing it. So that's 11, and let's go 2 or 3 more here to make it about the same length as the other side, 12. And this ring, I guarantee you won't be perfect, because usually when I do them in front of other people, I don't get them exactly perfect, but that that's okay. I always keep, if you ever, I don't know if you guys are like me, but the jewelry that I keep at home, that I keep for myself, is always the stuff that I made that wasn't quite perfect, but it also happens to end up being the stuff that people notice, and because I'm wearing it, and that they want to wear or purchase. So I just make them a perfect one. And make sure I use my hot light so I can see, just in case. All right, that's my last wrap right there. Ta-da! All right, so we're gonna go under this. Now, on this very last wrap, this is where you're gonna do your cutting. And you can see, so I didn't get that quite perfect, but it's okay. You're gonna do your cutting here. And so what you wanna do is you want to actually have the point of your wire go up towards the bottom of the piece of mother of pearl. That way nobody will ever be able to find it, and nobody will ever be able to feel it. Very important. So I am going to trim off this wire with a little bit more length than you would think. Not quite that much, that's a little too much. Let's get a little bit less there. And I am going to press that little tiny end right there up towards the mother of pearl. So I'm taking my chain nose plier and I'm gonna wrap that up and around. See that? Where'd it go? I don't know. So see, my wraps aren't perfect, but that's because I was doing it in front of you guys and talking too much. So, but the end, nobody's gonna feel it. So then we're gonna come to this other side, and I've already got this wrap kind of started. Let me kind of twist this just a little bit. I'm gonna bring this around, one final wrap, and I'm gonna go to the inside. I'm gonna push that across. Chain nose plier is gonna come in handy right now, because you can't get your fingers in there anymore. I'm gonna push that across. See that wire? I told you it has a memory. It remembers it wants to be right there. And I am going to trim that off. Same thing, just a little longer than you would think. Get him off of there and see him poking up. And then I'm gonna take my chain nose plier and I am going to wrap this up and around. Take a little finagling here. Up and around that 14 gauge wire. And you can see I'm kind of pressing it and pushing it and coercing it into place so that you don't see the end of it. Let me get this guy where I want him, just like so. And so that becomes now the top of the ring. Kind of cool, right? It's pretty. And so you can see that my bead does not wobble, nothing moves or comes out of place. I did make that size 8, so it is gonna fit. I don't feel any wires poking my fingers when I put that onto my finger, and to me, that's the most important. If you get the thing put together and it looks pretty much like a ring and it fits on a finger, you're good. But if it still pokes you when you put it on, then that's the thing where you don't want to kind of make a compromise, or where you don't want to try to, you know, make it, having a piece of wire poking somebody in the fingers, not making it your own. That's making it uncomfortable. And I don't actually wear a lot of jewelry all the time. I love to make it, but I don't wear that much. I kind of keep it simple. But that's because, you know, I feel like it's always hanging wrong on me or whatever, but I wear a lot of rings, I wear a lot of bangles, but I never wear a ring if it's actually poking me in the finger or if it's scratching me in any way. So one of the things you can do to make your jewelry special is A, always focus on those finishing touches, like tucking those wires in, and B, making it comfortable for people to wear, because people like to wear things they feel comfortable in, that they look good in, and that gets them compliments. That's what people like. So anyway, I think that's just a few little things to think about while you're making your coined bypass ring. Now, is this the only bead you can use to make this? No, okay? You can use any coin bead you want to. The keys are gonna be what we talked about as we were going along, making sure that the bead doesn't slip through your bezel, so it actually sits on top of your bezel so you can actually see it all the way around, but it does not slip through, so it sits on top of the bezel. See that? And so that's gonna be the most important part and of doing this. And so really any coin bead, I don't really like to use round beads to do this that much because they stick up really far. One of the things I love about coin beads is you get the presence of a round bead, but you don't get that height or that dimension out of it. And you can also do this with a square bead, a square shaped coin or a rectangle shaped coin or an oval shaped coin, but you're gonna have to make the actual bezel a different shape. It's the easiest to do it in a round coin. Why? Well, because that's how bail shaping pliers come, they're round. Now there are some out there that are square, there are some out there that are oval, so you can use those and you can do that with those. But a circle's really a pleasing shape. A lot of people love circles, they look really good, and so It's kind of nice. Other neat thing about this particular ring is if your size isn't quite right, you can actually resize it right now. Just by a little bit, if you want to, you can pop it on here and just kind of push that up your ring mandrel and kind of get that size a little bit larger. If it's not quite fitting onto your finger, you can push that up a little bit and size it right here. You can also shape it up. Maybe it got a little misshapen while you were working. You can also, if it's still too small, you can use that hammer like this to not only temper the wire, which means harden it, but you can also use it to make it a little bit bigger. So I just want to pull that back off. And that's kind of how I made it just a little bit bigger to fit on my finger. So anyways, we were just talking about classes and different classes. I hope you guys are enjoying all of them. One of my good friends, Wyatt, I know is teaching a couple different classes, and he always talks about the beauty of a bypass ring is if your fingers fluctuate sizes, which mine do on a daily basis, you can kind of adjust the size a little bit. But also if you make the bypass ring, you can actually then basically change the size of it for your customer. So say you made it in a size 8 and they need a size 8.5, you can obviously then size that a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller just by placing it onto your ring mandrel and adjusting that wire just a little bit. So it's a really nice ring. It's a very accommodating ring, if you will. So like a regular ring obviously doesn't have a way to do that, but this does. So someday it fits this finger, someday it fits this finger, but if it doesn't fit any of them anymore, adjust the size because it's a bypass and you don't have to remake the whole ring when you do that. And the beauty of the coin pearl that we're using, or the mother of pearl coin pearl, is that, well, it's going to go with everything. It's going to look great with everything. It's going to be a great summer ring, and it's going to be a lot of fun to wear. Now, if you guys want to pick up any of the supplies or the tools or anything that I've been working with today, you can go on to jewelschool.com. That's where all our supplies are. It's been a lot of fun hanging out with you guys today. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make this little bypass ring, and I hope you make lots and lots more, because kind of once you get the ring bug, I think you're going to make more and more and more. Everybody loves rings because they're on your fingers. You can always see them. People love to try rings on, and if you're a maker and you're also a salesperson, something you can do to draw people into your booth is to make a lot of rings and a lot of stretch bracelets, because they can try all those things on and love on them and probably buy them too. And the final tip about rings is one stone makes a piece of jewelry. So if you have a full strand of them with 15, 20, 30 beads, you can make 15, 20, 30 rings. And so it's very cost effective, and wire's cheap, so go for it. I hope to see you guys in another one of my 2024 Jewel School workshops. I hope you enjoyed the ring. I've got a couple more workshops coming up here. I'm going to be doing line bangles and also one called an endless summer bangle, which will be a lot of fun. And I have a secret in one of those classes where I teach you something a little extra. So definitely check that out, and check out all of the classes here in our Jewel School 2024 workshop. And I hope to see you guys again real soon.